Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump straight in, because today we are looking at a deeply fascinating and honestly sobering set of reports that deliver a hard diagnosis of the modern American church. Did you know that among evangelical churchgoers, the share of what they call integrated disciples, basically people with a consistent biblical worldview, actually fell from 21% to just 11%? And that happened in only 6 years. It's wild. The data points to a severely failing structural integrity. But we're not just going to admire the problem today, we're going to explore a meticulously detailed blueprint designed to rebuild the structure, using field-tested practices dating all the way back to the 1700s. Here is our agenda. We'll quickly cover the failing pipeline, asking for old paths, the 5 pillars, a phased timeline, leading versus trailing indicators, and finally, counting the cost. Okay, let's dive into this master blueprint. Section 1. The failing pipeline. Listen, the sources are incredibly clear here. We cannot view the upcoming statistics as 6 separate isolated problems. Instead, we have to look at this as a single foundation cracking in sequence. And it begins right at the top, at the pulpit level. According to the data, only 37% of American pastors hold a consistently biblical worldview. That leaves a staggering 63% who simply do not. The source establishes this as the absolute critical starting point of the pipeline failure. Because when foundational leadership lacks doctrinal consistency, the entire structure downstream is completely compromised. And as we move further down that pipeline, the structural integrity just drastically worsens. Think about children's and youth pastors. These are the very individuals explicitly charged with forming the faith of the next generation. Yet only 12% of them possess a consistently biblical worldview. The transmission mechanism is showing massive signs of failure exactly where it matters most. And this brilliantly illustrates the devastating end results of a pipeline that has completely failed to transmit the faith to young adults. Among Generation Z adults, the number who have arrived at a biblical worldview has plummeted to just 1%. Literally 1%. The data also notes that 2/3 of church-raised teenagers are just walking away as young adults. Generationally speaking, it is one failing pipeline, and the transmission of faith has nearly stopped. Section 2. Asking for old paths. So, faced with this kind of systemic collapse, what do we do? Well, the source makes a really bold claim here. The church doesn't need to invent a new programmatic solution. It actually needs to remember an old one. The report grounds this idea in Jeremiah 6:16, urging people to stop and ask for the old paths. Now, the real tragedy in this verse isn't that they were ignorant of the path. It was their willful refusal to walk in it. The report also points to Paul's letters to Timothy, where he tells him to hold fast the pattern of sound words. It's framed as a stewardship issue. Renewal isn't about new construction. It's about guarding and relaying something that was already handed down to us. Which brings us to a fascinating historical contrast. The report contrasts our modern era, which is, let's face it, characterized by a pursuit of speed, scale, and mass appeal, with the era stretching from the First Great Awakening in the 1720s right through the late 1800s. Back then, churches operated on a specific architecture focused intensely on depth, permanence, and instruction. That method wasn't defeated, It wasn't tested and found wanting. It was simply traded away. And why does this matter to you? Because it's actually incredibly good news. It means recovery is not speculative. We have centuries of field-tested proof that this older architecture actually works. Section 3, the 5 pillars. So what exactly did that field-tested architecture look like? Well, this isn't just nostalgia. It's a reproducible blueprint. The source outlines it as being supported by 5 load-bearing, independent pillars: catechesis, the household, the pulpit, membership, and eldership. These aren't isolated little programs. They rely entirely on one another to hold the structure up. Let's look at the first 2 pillars, catechesis and the household. The report highlights that systematic question and answer instruction using tools like Spurgeon's catechism was just standard practice. And surprisingly, the household itself was the primary classroom. Through a simple 15-minute daily family worship session involving a short reading, a catechism question, and a prayer, parents became the primary engines of enduring faith for the young. Pillars 3 and 4 focus on the actual gathering of the church. The source argues for a strong return to expository doctrinal preaching, meaning systematically working through Scripture rather than just catering to topical felt needs. And tied directly to this is the recovery of what's called the catechumenate. That is a formal period of rigorous doctrinal instruction that absolutely must be completed before someone is admitted into church membership. It's meant to completely replace that breezy, modern one-hour orientation. Finally, the fifth pillar addresses leadership directly. The report highlights the biblical necessity of vetting pastors and elders primarily for their character and sound doctrine. This is a sharp, intentional departure from hiring based on stage presence or market appeal. Because, as the source bluntly notes, when the shepherd doesn't hold a biblical worldview, there's absolutely no way the flock will either. Section 4. A phased timeline. Now, obviously, a church cannot build all 5 of these pillars overnight. It takes time. Recognizing this, the report provides a very strategic, chronological rollout. It starts with months 0 to 3, focusing entirely on leadership alignment. The elders absolutely must adopt this standard first before anything durable can be built. Then, from months 3 to 12, the pulpit and membership are reformed. Only after that foundational work is done do we see years 1 through 4 shift toward equipping households and aiming all discipleship efforts at children. But remember, the blueprint insists, eldership alignment has to happen first. Section 5, leading versus trailing indicators. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we measure success. If a church adopts this recovered historical blueprint, how do they know if it's working? The report argues that metrics like attendance and giving, which, let's be honest, modern churches completely obsess over, are merely trailing indicators. They just measure consumption, not actual spiritual formation. To measure true health, churches have got to track leading indicators: the percentage of households adopting daily family worship, actual catechetical progress, and the rigor of membership instruction. These are the crucial inputs that actually predict the next generation's worldview. Section 6, counting the cost. As we bring this explainer to a close, the source material forces a very sober conclusion. Adopting this historical blueprint requires counting the cost. Building for permanence is slow, it's difficult, and it definitely lacks immediate mass appeal. Quoting 1 Corinthians, the report warns that the fire will test each builder's work. The modern seeker century built its structures for speed, using wood, hay, and straw. And all that devastating data we reviewed at the beginning, that is the fire currently testing that work. Conversely, the old paths utilized materials designed for depth and permanence, meant to survive the flames. The source leaves us with this final, provocative challenge. The diagnosis of our failing pipeline is severe, but the prescription is incredibly clear and historically proven. We don't need to imagine a way out. The only question that remains is this: will we ask for the old paths, and this time, resolve to truly walk in them? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about.